Deep beneath the ruins of ancient Babylon, archaeologists uncovered tablets that whisper of a night so horrific, so unthinkable, that it was buried beneath centuries of silence. These weren't the glorified accounts carved onto temple walls or polished for official histories. No, these were the hushed testimonies of terrified witnesses, fragments written by trembling hands that struggled to make sense of what they had seen. What they described defied not only every law of nature, but even the authority of the gods themselves. And at the center of this darkness stood a woman, a queen. Her name was Semiramis, or Simis, as some accounts call her. To the people of Mesopotamia, she was once beloved, hailed as divine, her very name carried by the desert winds like a prayer. Yet to those who knew the truth, her legacy became something much darker, a name that even now carries the weight of dread. This isn't the sanitized version found in dusty history books. This is the story they tried to erase, the truth behind the most disturbing legend to ever emerge from the ancient world. Picture the most powerful woman alive, sitting in her chambers as dawn breaks over Babylon. Her hands are slick with blood that is not her own. Around her lie the lifeless bodies of 100 young men. They had entered the palace strong, beautiful, and full of vitality. By morning, they were nothing more than sacrifices to an appetite that went far beyond human understanding. So how does a queen, once revered as nearly divine, transform into something so monstrous that even the gods turned their faces away? The answer lies not in madness, but in something far more terrifying. An intentional, calculated hunger for power, a hunger that recognized no boundaries between the sacred and the profane. Semiramis wasn't born evil. Early fragments of history describe her reign very differently. She was brilliant, ambitious, and visionary. She expanded Babylon's reach through military campaigns so clever that generals studied her strategies for generations. She built cities that rivaled Egypt's grandeur and Persia's strength. She was beautiful beyond compare, but her intelligence and political cunning were her true weapons. For years, she ruled with wisdom and mercy. She established protections for slaves, created vast public works programs that improved daily life, and even maintained peace with neighboring kingdoms through clever diplomacy. She was not a tyrant, but a ruler who seemed to genuinely care for her people. In fact, palace records from her early reign describe her as compassionate, approachable, and endlessly curious. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. Whispers began circulating in palace halls about her consultations with shadowy figures, hooded oracles, who arrived from distant lands carrying knowledge older than Babylon itself. These weren't the priests of Marduk or Ishtar, familiar and trusted voices of the gods. No, these were strangers who spoke in ancient tongues and demanded payments that left even the most hardened courtiers pale. The first visible cracks in her reign came not in public, but in the dungeons. Where she once spared prisoners of war, she began selecting certain captives for purposes that were never explained. They vanished into the palace's lower levels and were never seen again. Servants who cleaned those chambers reported rooms that stank of sulfur and bore stains no water could wash away. Rituals began taking place beneath the palace. At first they were rare, but soon they grew frequent, complex, and demanding. They required precise astronomical alignments, rare ingredients brought from the farthest reaches of the known world, and blood oaths that bound participants to secrecy. The queen's personal chambers were remodeled again and again, with strange symbols etched into the very stones. Elements were added that served no practical purpose but created an atmosphere that made even seasoned guards uneasy. Her obsession grew, not with wealth or military conquests, but with immortality. She scoured the oldest texts, relics hidden in archives no king had dared touch. These weren't spells for simple potions. They were systems of philosophy and forbidden magic promising a way to sever the bond between humanity and mortality itself. Those closest to her noticed the change. Her once warm eyes turned cold, unnerving, almost predatory. Her voice, always commanding, began to carry vibrations that resonated in the bones of those who heard it. Courtiers left her presence shaken, unable to explain why resisting her words felt as exhausting as climbing a mountain. And then came the night that would stain her legacy forever. It began innocently enough, a royal feast, an offering in honor of the goddess Ishtar, but the preparations had taken nearly a year. Throughout Babylon, her servants had been selecting young men, slaves of perfect health and physical beauty. But these weren't ordinary selections. The candidates were subjected to bizarre examinations, tests that resembled religious ceremonies more than medical inspections. Palace physicians searched for unique birthmarks, bone structures, and proportions that matched criteria pulled from obscure, arcane texts. Those chosen were given months of preparation. Their diets are carefully crafted with formulas, said to purify their essence. They bathed daily in mineral-infused waters. They meditated under instruction, unknowingly preparing themselves for something far more sinister than palace service. They thought they were being honored. They believed they were chosen to serve the queen directly, to stand among the most privileged of Babylon's household. They could not have been more wrong. Semiramis had uncovered a ritual so forbidden that even the darkest cults refused to attempt it. It promised transformation, youth eternal, power divine, life beyond human limits. But the cost was unthinkable. The life force of 100 souls, taken in a single night. As dusk fell, the chosen were led into her private chambers one by one. The room they entered was no longer a bedroom, but something between a temple and a slaughterhouse. Incense burned in braziers carved with symbols older than Babylon itself. Candles made of human fat cast shadows that seemed to move with wills of their own. Mirrors positioned in strange geometries reflected impossible shapes. At the center was the bed, consecrated as an altar over an entire lunar cycle. Upon it, Semiramis awaited with a chalice carved from meteorite. Within was a wine laced with poison so rare only she possessed its antidote. Each young man drank willingly, smiling, believing he was entering sacred service. Each sip was his death sentence. What followed cannot be neatly described as murder. It was something darker, something that twisted every concept of life and death into a spectacle of horror. She didn't simply end their lives, she consumed them. Not just their flesh, not just their blood, but their very essence. As each man's body weakened under the poison's grip, she began her ritual, gestures, and incantations so ancient that even seasoned priests would have fainted at the sound. The texts claimed such rites bound the victim's soul to her, trapping it in a state of eternal servitude. And this wasn't passion, it wasn't desire. The physicality of the act was never about pleasure, it was domination. The ultimate assertion of power, reducing a human life into nothing more than fuel for her ascension. Each ritual was grotesque, an obscene parody of union, where she claimed not only the body, but the memory, the knowledge, the spark that made a man human. It was supernatural cannibalism, feeding on spirit as much as flesh, an unholy banquet that sought to transform mortality into godhood. By dawn, the chamber reeked of death and things that had no earthly origin. Guards specially prepared for this grim task carried the bodies away, swearing blood oaths of silence. They buried the corpses in unmarked graves beneath Babylon. But the queen's transformation had already begun. Those who saw her in the days after spoke of a glow that radiated from her skin, unnatural and blinding. Looking into her eyes caused nausea and vertigo, as if one were peering into something bottomless. Her voice now compelled obedience, without question. It was as though she no longer belonged fully to the human world. Official records claimed the men had been reassigned to distant provinces, yet within the palace, servants whispered of screams that echoed through the halls that night, of shadows moving independently, of the queen speaking in languages older than mankind. Her transformation wasn't just physical, her mind grew cruel. Executions became common for the slightest offenses. Sacrifices to the gods grew darker, bloodier, and more frequent. But the most terrifying shift was in her self-image. She no longer presented herself as queen, but as goddess incarnate. Temples were built not to Marduk or Ishtar, but to Semiramis herself. Worship was demanded. Fear and awe fused into one. But she had made a mistake. The ritual had been designed for gradual use, absorbing one soul at a time over years. Absorbing 101 night created a cosmic imbalance, a tear in the fabric of reality itself. The land grew restless, animals fled the city, crops withered without cause, the very air felt heavier, poisoned by unseen forces. Most terrifying were the apparitions, ghostly figures of the sacrificed men wandering Babylon, faces twisted in grief and rage. Then came Theron, the lone survivor. He had been among the chosen, but a genetic resistance to the poison saved him. He feigned death among the corpses and escaped through the palace sewers. What he witnessed that night he carried with him, scars etched both on his body and in his memory. Theron became the voice of resistance. He described in detail the horrors he saw, the ritual, the communion with entities beyond human understanding. The moment she bound souls to herself, his testimony spread like wildfire. Nobles, priests, and citizens rallied around him. Semiramis panicked. The texts had warned her. The ritual's power would unravel if even one victim survived. Theron wasn't just a man. He was her doom incarnate. She unleashed terror upon Babylon. Entire districts locked down. Suspected sympathizers tortured in rituals darker than any interrogation. But Theron slipped into the city's underground, protected by priests who saw him as divinely preserved. Finally, the resistance called for trial. Not a coup, not an assassination, but a tribunal of gods and men. The trial took place at the ziggurat, where every deity's priests gathered. Theron testified, scars on his body proof of what he endured. Semiramis did not deny it. She declared herself divine, untouchable by human judgment. But the gods did not recognize her claim. Divine fire fell upon her, consuming her mortal form. Yet her final words chilled all who heard. Death would not end her influence. The souls she had bound, the power she had stolen, the wounds she had carved into reality would endure. And indeed, Babylon never recovered. The city that once shone as a beacon of civilization spiraled into decline. Storms, plagues, and endless instability haunted its streets. Theron became a prophet, wandering from city to city, warning that power without morality leads only to ruin. His eyes carried the weight of having seen ultimate evil and lived. The legacy of Semiramis remains disputed. Were the tablets history or myth, warning or memory? Scholars still debate. But in lands where ancient bloodlines whisper the old stories, her name is not spoken with reverence. It is spoken with terror. And so, the lesson endures. Absolute power, when corrupted by absolute desire, leads not to immortality, but to damnation. If you found this exploration of one of history's darkest legends fascinating, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more hidden stories from the ancient world. What other forbidden tales would you like to see uncovered? Drop your suggestions in the comments and ring the bell so you don't miss what comes next. Because remember, some knowledge comes with a price even queens could not afford to pay.